Hey, my name is Petra Cruz, and I'm obsessed with all things birth, but especially VBAC. I am a birth doula and mom who had a vaginal birth after 3 cesareans. In this podcast, we dive deep into the inspirational world of vaginal birth after cesarean. In each episode, you'll hear inspiring VBAC stories, practical tips from professionals who've championed the VBAC cause, as well as my personal journey and how it might help you on yours. From mindset shifts to evidence-based practices, you'll leave each episode feeling inspired and informed. Get ready to soak in the wisdom, embrace the strength within, and join this incredible VBAC community. This is the VBAC Junkie Podcast. Okay, well, today I have the pleasure of talking to Alyssa, and she is going to share her cesarean story as well as her home birth after cesarean story. So I cannot wait to dive into this topic. I just love it. Obviously, I'm obsessed. So wherever you would love to begin, you can even tell us a little bit about you, Alyssa, to get us going here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. So I am an acupuncturist turned stay-at-home mom, and I just started a little online practice helping mothers and all women with their health through herbal medicine and eventually health coaching. So I'm excited about that. So when I was an acupuncturist, it was during 2020, so it was obviously challenging times when I got pregnant. And I actually worked through my whole pregnancy and I didn't have any major issues. I really was trusting my body during the pregnancy and just like working like normal. And I was getting regular chiropractic adjustments. And I had planned for a home birth with my first daughter, which didn't work out. But so I went into labor, I think it was like a Thursday, and then I had her on, oh wait, I can't remember. Sorry. I had her on a Thursday and I went into labor on that Sunday before. So I was in labor for a really long time and I just wasn't progressing. I never felt the urge to push. I didn't feel any like descending feeling. So I hired a midwife too. And she made the call because my daughter's heart rate wasn't rebounding like it should during contractions. And then she was checking me and my water broke and there was meconium in the fluids. So she just made the call. And luckily I was the only one at that time at the hospital, and the hospital is only 15 minutes away. So it was really crazy, very rushed when we got to the hospital, and I thought maybe I would still be able to deliver her vaginally, but they basically shoved me in the OR, and there was no like communication really. I don't even know where my midwife was now that I think about it. At that time, I was like in active, it felt like active labor. Like I was pushing or not pushing, I was having contractions very regularly, not maybe 2 or 3 minutes apart. And I had already been in labor for probably a good better portion of 2 days. So I was very tired and I couldn't eat anything because I was just so nauseous. And I went in the OR and there was probably like, I don't know, at least 8 nurses in there. There's so many nurses in there. And the doctor luckily was very gentle and said, because of what you have already been through, we have to go on with a C-section. I know that's not what you wanted. I know that's not what you intended, but we're trying to do the best interest for you and your baby. And, you're in active labor. You have no idea. Like, you're like, I don't know. Like, oh, I'm having contractions. I just peed myself. Like, I need to take these pants off. And they allowed my husband to be in the OR with me, which was really nice considering it was September of 2020. And he said that she was delivered within 30 minutes. And then I came out of anesthesia and it was just like such a whirlwind of a day. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. And so did they like voice any options at all to you, or they were just like, this is what we're doing?
No, yeah, I didn't have any options. However, I didn't ever see any of those doctors during my pregnancy. I had one ultrasound and it was just a handheld Doppler one from my midwife at 20 weeks. I didn't have any ultrasounds prior to that or after it. And I was just very like, and I just really trusted my body. But I think that sometimes things just don't happen how you want them to go. And she was also sunny side up too. So her spine was along my spine. She was head down though, which was good. But the labor felt really intense and like very concentrated in my back.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very uncomfortable. It was a completely different experience than my most recent labor. But yeah, they didn't give me any options. And then afterwards, they rushed, like, I had to advocate and like ask to see my baby after I came out of anesthesia. My husband like had to go and yell at the nurses to let us see the baby and do skin to skin because we live in a high altitude environment. They were worried about her oxygen
Mm-hmm.
because it was below 90, I think. And so once I got her skin to skin, they had already called for the Flight for Life to come get her, and it was snowing. So they were driving up to come get her. Yeah. It
Oh my
was very
gosh.
traumatic looking back at it, but I think I was kind of so loopy and drugged up, and I hadn't slept in 4 or 5 days that I was just relying on the hospital, which I feel like you should be able to in emergency situations when, even though that's not the case most of the time, unfortunately. And so then, and we were first time parents too. So we were like, I don't know, like, how scary is it to have low oxygen? And once we did skin to skin and I was holding her, her oxygen level went up. But the pediatrician on staff, this is what my midwife told me afterwards. She said that she was a new pediatrician and she had never met her before because our midwife had a relationship with most of the hospital staff because she'd been serving women in this area for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very adamant about sending her down. So we were nervous, as first time parents. We're like, I don't know what to do. And then I couldn't go down with her because I had just gone through this emergency C-section surgery. So my husband went down with her and stayed in the queue down there with her. And once she got to the hospital down there, he was talking with the nurse staff and they're like, oh yeah, she's fine. Like they took her off oxygen halfway down. She's doing great. And he said, compared to all the other babies in the NICU, she was fine. And so he slept in the like waiting area holding her the whole night.
Oh my gosh, that is
Yeah, it was
crazy.
a whirlwind. And then the next day, I went down to be with her and we stayed one night in the hospital down there. And then the next day, it was like, I don't know. I felt like I'd never been treated worse. I don't
Oh,
know if they were like, it felt like they were almost like punishing us because we were trying to do a home birth.
mm,
Um, but that's just our perspective of what was going on.
yeah. Were they like verbally treating you like disrespectfully or something, or how was that?
It was more like I was starting to feel pain and I wanted my catheter out. So I would say, hey, I would like my catheter out. And they'd be like, okay, 1 second. They leave. And then they wouldn't come back for like 2 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Like, hey, I still want this catheter out. Like I can feel the pain. You haven't given me my like $30 aspirin pill or whatever for the pain for the C-section. And I need that too. And they just kept like saying, oh, hold on, and like leaving and then coming back. Like they weren't being like verbally disrespectful, but I just
Mm,
feel like they weren't um like responding as they would have if I had been a previous patient or whatever.
yeah, and unfortunately, like I have heard stories of that happening where it is a home birth transfer and they are treating the mom or the dad or whoever the parents are so terribly because they're saying like, "Oh, it's your fault that your baby's like that." When it's like you can't say that. Like you
Yeah.
don't know. And even if it like if you felt like it was, why would you say that to a mom that just gave birth to her baby? Like that is just terrible. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well,
If they
I'm so sorry that happened to you.
oh, thank you. It's hindsight now, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so were you put under general anesthesia for the C-section?
Yeah, I was completely out.
Oh my
Completely. Like they didn't give
gosh.
me any options and we were just kind of rushing. And like I said, my contractions were so quick. My husband was freaking out because it had already been like a couple days of me having contractions and not sleeping and not eating. And he didn't know what to do either. So he was mostly just concerned for my livelihood at that time. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was a crazy experience. And luckily my daughter is healthy now. She's
Hmm.
3, she's gonna be 4 this year.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I'm so happy she's good after that like whirlwind
It was
experience.
it was crazy. And I've gone through a lot of ups and downs with like regret and feeling like guilty for doing that to her, or like having her have that experience, because obviously that's not the experience you want your newborn baby to have. Is like, oh, welcome to the world, get in this car, go down here, and your
Yeah.
mom's not anywhere to be seen. You don't know where your mom is.
I know, but hey, at least you got to her as soon as you humanly could, like
I tried,
as
yeah.
fast as humanly possible. Because
Yeah.
man, yeah, but I mean, you got that beautiful skin to skin once you did, and that is just so amazing. So obviously that was like, a whirlwind to starting your postpartum journey. So do you feel like that affected how you went into your postpartum now?
Oh, of course. I had a horrible skin rash right at the incision, and
Mm.
that spread over all over my whole body. And I thought it was a delayed PUPS, which is like just basically like an irritated skin rash before you have the baby, and it usually clears up afterwards. I'm sure you know. But the doctor had no idea what it was. My midwife had no idea what it was. It was so uncomfortable, and I could hardly move around for a while. My postpartum was really, really hard and tricky with my first daughter. And my husband only took 2 weeks off of work. So he was sleep deprived because he had to help me out of the bed in order to nurse the baby, and because I couldn't bend at my like waist for a while. So it was really tricky time in our lives for sure. It was Postpartum was really hard, and I had trouble with her latching. And eventually down the road, I ended up nursing her for almost 3 years, but I had mastitis twice, and I had a nipple blep, which is when the skin like covers the exterior of the duct, and it gets really painful. But luckily I'm an acupuncturist, so I just like stuck a needle in there and it was fine. But yeah, it was a really tough fourth trimester for me.
Mhm. Definitely. Yeah, and that is so common, like after cesareans with having a hard initial start to breastfeeding, just because of all the drugs that is going through your body, you're healing from major surgery, you're still trying, I mean, we're trying to figure out breastfeeding anyway once we have this baby, but to include all these other aspects of the birth, yeah, it can be hard, but amazing. You made it to 3 years. Oh my gosh, that's so incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. It was really tough. And I used a nipple shield, and I watched so many YouTube videos on breastfeeding. And, it was still during 2020, 2021. So I didn't really, there was nobody coming to your house to help you with the latch or anything like that at that time. So I was like, I'm just going to figure this out.
Yeah. So how did this affect your next birth? Because obviously you had a second child. Did you guys
Yeah.
decide right away you wanted to have a baby?
No, we knew we wanted to have another baby eventually, but I didn't really think about it until she was around 2. And then I had a miscarriage 2 summers ago, which was really hard. And when we got pregnant, I was really excited, but then I kind of had this overwhelming feel of dread because I didn't know, like, I didn't want to have the same experience, right? So around 12 weeks, I went to a midwifery center that was in a hospital by us.
Mhm.
And they were not like the traditional midwifery. I don't know if you've heard the term of midwifery, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's like more, allopathic medical based practices. And when I went in, she was like, oh, she's very friendly and great. And she's like, do you want to do an ultrasound? You say you're at 12 weeks. Like, do you want to check? And I was like, I guess so. Like, maybe I should check. And then you could obviously tell then that it wasn't viable and there was no heartbeat like there should be. Like, you should be able to find it pretty easily. And her whole demeanor changed, and I felt like I was not treated like a human anymore. It was a horrible experience with that miscarriage. And then she had me go into the ultrasound tech a couple days later, I think. to confirm if maybe I just had my timing off and maybe it was a little younger than I thought, but it was definitely not viable. And I could tell during the ultrasound, the internal ultrasound, which is already uncomfortable. And the tech, they have to go by protocol and say, like, I can't tell you anything about it. And so I was like literally tearing up while they were doing the internal ultrasound. And it was just very, I guess cold is like the best thing to say about it. And I was by myself too, because they had all of the like no visitors allowed still installed. So it was really cold and lonely. And I ended up, passing the miscarriage naturally, which was a very interesting experience. Your whole body, once your body recognizes, and she had labeled it as a miscarriage. So like the reason why I hadn't miscarried prior to the 12 weeks was, and they think that it stopped being viable around 6 weeks, is because my body still thought I was pregnant. I don't know why. Maybe it was like just all mental, because once I realized that it wasn't viable, a couple days later, I started bleeding. And you go through a whole, like, it was almost like a mini labor where I felt contractions and then it passed and everything was fine and I healed from that. Mm-hmm. So that was another traumatic experience with a traditional hospital. And unfortunately, a claimed midwife practice.
Yeah. Excuse me. And it's unfortunate, because you said something about midwife, and I hear that a lot. And typically, the midwives in the hospital system, they're almost like an extension of like the obstetric model, They still have to follow all these policies and protocols. So it's definitely not like an out-of-hospital midwife.
Yeah.
Like, the out-of-hospital midwife is more holistic and, like you said, it's just so different. So I think that is good that you mentioned that, because there is a difference between a midwife through the hospital and one outside of the hospital. And gosh, I'm so sorry you had that experience. That's not easy. Like, you're already going through something hard, and for people to be that way, so unemotional and so just cold towards you, I just can't imagine. So after, you had this miscarriage, how did you move forward? Like, what were your next steps? Did you want to wait, after that happened, and so you could try to heal through this miscarriage?
Yeah, we waited. So that was in the summer of 2022. And so I didn't get pregnant till April-ish of 2023. So we waited a while for my body to heal and just like to mentally get around that space. And even if we wanted to try again, and, we were just kind of passively trying. And then when I found out I was pregnant, it was very exciting and also very scary, because I had gone through this miscarriage. And I know that there's a really high amount of people that have miscarriages, but nobody ever talks about it. Mm-hmm. And people are kind of very confused as to how to respond when you tell them that you've had a miscarriage. And it was tricky because I had some friends that knew that I was pregnant. And then when I told them I had a miscarriage, it was just kind of like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then they don't talk about it. Like, they think that you don't want to talk about it. But for me, I think it was really helpful and healing to discuss it with other people, and people that have had miscarriages, they seem to be the same way for me too.
Yeah.
So when I found out that I was pregnant again, I wanted to find out earlier, obviously, if it was viable. So I just went to the local hospital here, or the local general practice doctors here. And we live in kind of like a secluded area in Summit County, Colorado. And so the hospital up here doesn't have a lot of the emergency stuff that you typically need. Like, they don't have a NICU up here. They don't do VBACs up here at all. And so I went to a practice, an OBGYN practice, that had really good reviews, and a lot of my friends go there, and they say that they're very like more natural, holistic focused. So I went there and told them that I was going to transfer to a different practice in Denver so I could do a VBAC, because I knew I always wanted to do a VBAC. I had listened to a lot of, podcasts and read a lot about how VBACs were actually less risky than doing a repeat cesarean. So I really wanted to do what was right for me and the baby. So when I went there, they were great, and they really pushed all of like the routine blood work and ultrasounds and genetic testing, all of that stuff. And I was feeling like really overwhelmed and was like, oh, thank goodness I'm not going to deliver here, because I really don't want to feel pressured into doing anything. So after we transferred down to a practice in Denver, I did I compared a lot of different practices down there, and I found one that said, oh, we have midwives, we do all of these things. They delivered at the hospital that I wanted to deliver at, that had really nice birth suites and everything. And I was so disappointed that when I went down there, they were completely not what they had said they were. They wanted to push all these different tests. They said that we'll have to do an epidural just in case. And I was like, no, I don't want to do an epidural. Like, I've labored before without one. I think I'll be fine. They're like, well, it's really more risky if you don't do a preemptive epidural and you risk going in and having to do general anesthesia with your C-section, or I can't remember the terms that she was saying. So that was not a great experience. And I went to that practice a couple times before I realized that I just really didn't want to work with those providers, because they just kept trying to pressure me into things. And anytime I would question them about anything, they would get really uncomfortable and like defensive about what they were saying to me. And then on top of that, I had high numbers for gestational diabetes for the first test. So they wanted me to do a second test. And I was like, I'm not doing a second test. I'm just not. And so what happens if I don't do a second test? And they basically, in a roundabout way, said, well, if you don't do a second test, then you can't have a VBAC.
Oh my gosh. That's just so crazy. So they're just like piling on the stipulations as you go.
Yeah, it was very overwhelming. And I'm, pregnant, and we're making these 2-hour trips down to the providers down there to try to do a VBAC. And we wanted to be at a lower elevation in order to prevent having to do the transfer thing again. So there was lots of tears, and I was just like very emotional already, all the hormones of being pregnant. And I think I was right around 30 weeks when I was, like upset. I was like scrolling on Facebook, and I saw that my friend that lived by me had posted something about a midwife. And I was like, oh, is there like another midwife that's servicing this area? Because there was only one, and we had used her before. And there was, she did everything she could have done possible, but there was just like something that about it that I didn't want to reach out to her again for this pregnancy. And I think it was a lot of fear. Like, I was afraid to have an emergency transfer. So I wanted to have this birth at a birthing center, but I got denied because of how long I was in labor. And only one birthing center in my area did VBACs. And you have to have like, I don't know what they were wanting you to like accomplish in your first pregnancy with a cesarean in order to have a VBAC there, but I got denied. So even though I didn't have any risk factors at all, other than that I had an emergency C-section. So I think I just really wanted to prevent having to do any kind of transfer. So I just immediately went to the Western, typical standard care practice. And when I saw that my friend was doing home birth with a midwife, it just like kind of clicked for me. And I was like, why am I not doing a home birth? Like, this is so silly. Like, I should just reach out to this midwife and see if she has any availability, even though it's like really soon, like it's 10 weeks left until, 40 weeks,
Yeah.
I reached out to her, and she had availability, and she immediately scheduled a call with me so we could chat about what my goals were, what I was experiencing, why I was reaching out, even, and what my ideal birth was. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have seen like 5 providers, and she's the first one that has asked me what is my ideal birth,
Oh my gosh.
which is so sad. I mean,
I
that's
know.
like the big event. People should know what you're expecting or what you would like.
The fact that this midwife asked that, oh, I just love that so much.
It was great. It was amazing. And she spent 45 minutes talking to me about my experience with my previous C-section and my miscarriage and my current pregnancy. And I knew that she was going to be the right provider for me, or right one to help me with this birth. So we did all the regular checks, and she wasn't concerned with my potential gestational diabetes. Like, my sugars were high, and I would just see the finger prick thing 4 times a day, which is not fun. But I was nervous too. And so I changed my diet. I got that book that was like just like real food for gestational diet. Yeah, it's a great book. And so I just followed that, and my numbers were fine. She wasn't worried about it. And the way that she articulates things that she wants you to remember is amazing, because she has like this gentle, calming nature about her, but it was direct. So she was like, if you could find somebody that could give you a couple bags of milk, if you know anybody, just in case when the baby comes out, it has trouble latching, because if they're having sugar withdrawal, if you do have high sugars, it's just in case thing. Otherwise, we have to go to the hospital to get basically sugar water for the baby. And so that was just an example of something that she wanted me to do preemptively, but she wasn't like, oh, like, your numbers are high, you cannot do a home birth.
That is
So
amazing.
yeah, it was wonderful. And we everything went so smoothly up until, and continued to go smoothly actually, when I went into labor. I had a ton of downward pressure the last couple weeks of my pregnancy, and I was walking a lot. I was chasing around a 3-year-old all day, every day. So I had a lot of downward pressure. I could feel the baby moving a lot. And I think I started to have like mild contractions a couple days before I went into labor. And then I my sister was going to come out and help me, and my scheduled due date was the 19th of January, and she had like this gut feeling in her that she needed to be here on the 18th. So she flew in on the 18th, and her and my dad and my daughter all hung out and spent time together, and my contractions like started amping up. Like, I could feel like pressure, like, was it prodromal labor?
Yeah.
um and I was like, is this real? Like, I'm not sure, like, it's just kind of like more downward pressure again. And then I went for a car ride to like get something from the grocery store, and they amped up even more. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So I was texting my midwife about it, and then she was like, just keep me updated, because she was about like an hour and a half away. So we had dinner, and it was amping up more, and I was like starting to really feel like that it was more intense. But I knew that with the last time I went into labor, it kind of mellowed out in the evening. So I was like, oh, it'll probably mellow out in the evening, and I'll probably have the baby tomorrow, or like late at night tonight. And that's not what happened. I was like, I'll just do all the things that I know slows labor down. Like, I'll have like a little glass of wine, and I'll take a bath, and like the contractions just kept amping up and amping up and amping up. And so my husband ended up calling the midwife and his sister to come help with our daughter. And they just kept getting more and more intense. And went and labored on the couch for a little bit by myself while my husband put our daughter to bed. And man, I have never experienced anything like that kind of intense feeling, and almost felt like I was a toothpaste tube, and things in my body was just squeezing the toothpaste out of me. It was very out of body. Like, I felt like I had no control over my body, and I was just trying to breathe through it. And I kept telling myself to relax every time the contractions came, and to like ride the wave of the contraction, because in my first pregnancy and labor, I felt like I was just resisting it so much because it just hurt so bad. And I knew, you read all the books beforehand, and I knew I should relax, but I obviously wasn't relaxing, and nothing felt good. Like anytime anyone touched me, it made it worse. I didn't like the counter pressure on my back. I was trying to flip her, so I was on my hands and knees the entire time I would have a contraction. And so this time I was trying to really relax, and I had done some like meditative practices before going into labor this time. And I also did a lot of birth art, which is like, drawing what your ideal looks like, or like how you vision yourself or how you vision your baby. And I think that helped a lot to help me get through the labor. So our midwife showed up an hour before I had the baby.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So you're going fast.
Yeah, it was insane. It went like so fast. And the second she showed up, she got the tub inflated because I just wanted my husband to be next to me, and I was like trying to coach him to coach me because he didn't really know what I needed, because in the previous labor he was like, breathe, you could do it, breathe, you got it, and he was like very like excited, I feel like, from my perspective, and I didn't like that the first time. And so this time he was just kind of quiet and was like, just tell me what you need. And then I kept saying like, I need more than 4 minutes between contractions. And luckily he didn't tell me this, but there was only like 2 or 3 minutes between contractions. And so yeah, our midwife always brings an assistant. So they got the pool all set up, and then I labored in there maybe 20 or 30 minutes. And I remember just squeezing like the liner and saying like, this is so hard. I need like a more of a break. I'm exhausted. I'm so tired. And our midwife, she looked at me and she's like, Alyssa, it's so hard because you're so close. You're almost there. And that like completely changed excuse me my it just completely changed my demeanor and like how I was feeling. I was like, oh, I'm close, like what is really, I'm close. And I started to feel like a burning sensation, they call it the ring of fire, and I was like, the baby's crowning. And then my husband and midwife looked down, they're like, oh, the baby is not crowning, but they didn't like say anything to me.
Yeah.
And I was like yelling at my husband, like, don't drop the baby, you have to catch the baby, because that was one of his like wants that he wanted for the birth. And he was like, I don't see anything. And I was like, what? Like, how do you, like, I can feel it. Like, I was like, between contractions, like yelling at them.
Mm-hmm.
And I also was like making very primal noises. And I feel really bad for our neighbors, but, um, so so our midwife was like, Alyssa, like, she's just so calm. Like, it was amazing. And she's like, how about you see if you can feel a baby? And I could totally feel the baby's head and the hair. And that like made me feel so excited and like confident. And so the next like contraction that came, I just let it take over my body. Like it felt like I had no control over what was happening. It was just going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then they looked, and she was all the way out, like up to her rib cage, like her arms were like flailing around after that. And our midwife was like, oh, you just have one more push and she's here. And then like she was just there. It was incredible. And I had like that blissful state of like no pain, like she's here, we did it. It's absolutely incredible.
Oh my gosh, that is just so amazing. I just like, oh, I can feel like all your feelings because I remember feeling those feelings, and it is just like nothing in this world. Like you worked so hard to bring your baby in this world, and you did it. So how long was your labor like from the first, like when you started feeling like crampy and contractions till like you actually gave birth to her?
It's like right around 4 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is super fast. Holy
Yeah.
cow.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, it had like my dad and my sister were like, wait, you just had a baby. And so they came
Wow.
over and met her and everything. And um yeah, I just kind of sat in the pool with her for a little bit, and then we eventually like got out, and then my midwife coached me through birthing the placenta because I think it had been like an hour maybe after I had her that I birthed the placenta, and I had like two minor tears, but they didn't need stitches, and everything has healed so well. I mean, it's almost been 12 weeks since I had her, and everything's just great. Like breastfeeding has been way easier this time around, and I didn't break out in that rash. And yeah, it's just incredible how different of an experience it has been so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did so many things differently this time around. So what do you feel is the most like transformative thing that you did that helped you, get to your VBAC?
I think the biggest thing for me was probably the birth art. I read this book called Birthing from Within,
Yes.
and I just did all of the exercises in there, and that really helped me work through my fears and my goals, basically. And like, what happens if you don't meet your goals? And just putting pen to paper and doing like the art behind it really helped me a lot with like my mental emotional stability with this pregnancy. And having a midwife that is completely on board with whatever I want to do, but also is very informative if, if because I also tested positive with my first pregnancy with strep B. Is that what it's called?
The
Yeah.
GBS.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Herpes strep.
Yeah.
I tested positive for that with my first pregnancy, and then I took all of like the probiotics and did everything for this one, and I still tested positive. And she was like, "Well, I can have all of like the things on if your baby does have issues with it, but I don't. If you don't want to do the antibiotics, we don't have to." She was just very like, "We can prepare for it, but I'm not going to do things just in case it happens," which was really nice for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into this, like, how do you feel now? How do you feel now that you've gone through it and you have your beautiful baby that you gave birth to at home?
I felt pretty amazing. Like, kind of, people say that it changes you, and I was like, "Oh, sure." Like, I'm sure it changes you a little bit, but it really does like completely change your confidence level and make you feel like you can do anything. Like, you got through some of the hardest and most painful. For me, it was very, very painful. I've heard of women that have had no pain during birth. I'm like, wow, like I have no idea what that is like, but
Right.
it was pretty painful and so rewarding, and just makes me feel like I can achieve anything.
Yeah, definitely. I totally get that. So somebody that is planning, a VBAC or home birth, what tips would you give them? Do you feel like would be like the best things for them to do or the most important things for them to do?
Yeah. So I would absolutely, if you are planning a home birth and it's your first pregnancy and first baby, and this is like a rule from my midwife that she told me, is to hire a doula, because when you are a first time parent, you have no idea what to expect. And I thought that my husband and I educated ourselves pretty well. We read all the books, we looked into all the research and the statistics and listened to all the podcasts, but still, you really have no idea what is going to happen in your own pregnancy. Whereas when you have a doula and like a partner with the birth, they can really like shift things around. And I think in hindsight, with my first pregnancy, I should have been moving more. I should have rested more. Like when I started feeling contractions, I was just awake and I wouldn't sleep because I thought the baby was just going to be here. And I should have rested and slept and took more time off work than I did because I was working in a very, very high volume practice, and that was kind of draining. And I thought, like, oh, well, when my patients find out that I'm pregnant, they'll probably stop coming to see me. And it was the reverse. Like everybody just was like, oh, she's going to be pregnant. She's going to be gone. So we all have to get in. So I was
Wow.
like working way too much, I think. So tip number one, rest more than you think you need to. And tip number two, absolutely hire a doula for your first pregnancy. And even, in later pregnancies with having an HBAC, a home birth after cesarean, because they can just be a game changer with calming down the mood of the room, making sure everything is going right. And then the husband or your partner can focus more on you, where they can like do all of like the other work that needs to be done. Another tip, which I've been finding in my practice with the herbal business, is to educate yourself. But man, women, we just like always educate ourselves on everything. It's incredible. And I think that maybe it's because a lot of the times we become the default parents or like the default household manager, that we already educate ourselves on everything. But if you're not doing that, like definitely educate yourself on home births. And if you're hiring a doula or a midwife, to educate yourself on their education and what they're comfortable with, and all of those fun questions to ask people that are going to assist you with your birth.
Yeah, I think those are amazing tips. And I also do suggest that because even like I've been a doula for a mom who was giving birth to her fourth baby, and she was also a doula. So the doula wanted a doula. So it really does help. And, I'm not saying that to like toot my own horn or whatever, but I felt like when I had a doula at my birth, it helped slow things down. It helped so I didn't feel like, like my husband could tend to the other kids while I was able to focus on just laboring or, whatever. So, and there's so many different doulas. I always suggest hire multiple or interview multiple doulas because there's not just one doula for everybody. Your personalities, everybody's personalities are different. They practice differently. Midwives, same thing. If there's multiple midwives to choose from, interview them, ask them like hard questions that might even be uncomfortable, but this is your birth and you're paying them to support you. So making sure that you are being supported the way you actually want to be supported, I think that is so incredibly important. And I don't take any like, I don't get hard feelings if they don't hire me. I'm like, they're obviously going to find the doula that works best for them. So don't worry about hurting your doula's feelings. We get it.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I love that about birth workers, is that they are like, absolutely no hard feelings, because my midwife is actually friends, and they do backups with my previous midwife. And I was like, is she going to be upset that I didn't hire her again? And she's like, oh no, we don't, that's not how it works with birth workers. Like, absolutely not. She wants you to have your birth the way you want to have it. And so do I.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not, at the end of the day, it's not about us, and it's not about your OB or your midwife or whoever it is. It's about you and it's about what you want this birth to look like. Because, your OB is not going to look back and be like, oh, I wish I would have done this during her birth to make it more magical for her. No, they're not going to do that. Like, I'm sorry to say it, but like, it all depends on you. So just making that active decision to take charge of your birth because it's your birth. And I love the way that you did that. So if somebody has a hard time with I don't know, taking charge, I don't know if that's hard for you or not, but it seems like you pivoted a lot along the way to get the birth experience that you wanted. So what is, I guess, a good way for them to do that if it might feel hard in the moment?
Yeah, it was really hard for me because I'm a recovering people pleaser too. So it's like, yeah, it's really tricky because you want to go in the doctor's office and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm easy, like whatever you guys want." But in this scenario, you need to be really direct, and it was really really hard for me to do that. Whereas luckily my husband, it's not hard for him to be direct. He's not a people pleaser and never was. So it was helpful for me to have him almost like coach me through my appointments, because some of the appointments he had to take our daughter with him and I had to be alone in the appointments. And he's like, listen, you have got to advocate for yourself. And it's not just for you, it's for our baby too. So I think also having, whether it's a friend or your partner, and almost have like meetings where you can decompress from whatever experience, or just to like even talk about the appointments, because sometimes people don't even talk about what happened in their appointments with their partners. They just go in and let it happen and then they come home. So that's another thing that I would suggest is to, either journal about it or talk to your parents or your partner or a friend about what's going on. Because once you hear yourself talk about it, you realize, oh, wow, like I should have said, no, I'm not going to drink this. I'm going to drink this. Or no, I don't want that test done today. Yeah, things like that. It
Yeah,
just makes it
exactly.
reflect. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes, like you said, it does help to like hear it out loud or to have feedback from somebody else. Because I know I've done that too, where it's like, why did I say yes to that? Now that I say it out loud, it's like, for what? For what reason? But when you're in that moment, it feels like you have to. You almost feel like you have to. But in reality, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. So it's totally your choice. So for anybody that is planning a home birth, how do you feel like mentally, what is the best thing for them to do? I know you said like doing the birthing from within. Do you feel like that was your mental work along the way or processing like your previous birth experience?
Yeah, definitely processing if you are doing a HBAC, processing your previous birth experience, because it's very traumatic and it still brings up a lot of emotions for me to think about it. But working through that has been huge because a lot of times you don't want to even think about like the bad stuff, right? You don't want to think like, oh, that was such a horrible experience. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. But if you're having another baby, even if you're not doing a home birth or a VBAC, you should think about and remember how it felt during that time so that if it comes up again or if it doesn't come up again, you know how to work through it. And I think what really helped me too with planning this home birth, even though I wasn't originally planning it when I got pregnant, was knowing that my midwife had a backup plan. Like she had multiple midwives to back her up, and she had multiple assistants to come to my birth if something happened. And I had her in January, which it snows a lot where we live, and that's like snowstorms and road closures are a huge issue up here. So when I talked to her about it, she had multiple ways to help us. Like she prepared us. I can't remember what the medical term is for it, but she prepared us for Eric potentially, my husband potentially catching the baby, and how she would coach us over the phone and through video call if she couldn't be here, and just preparing, almost like preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best. And I think mentally that really helped me because I knew that if things like completely went haywire and I was laboring bad and she couldn't get here, or there was something that we had planned for in case something like that would happen. So I wasn't worried about the unknown, I guess, is what I'm getting.
No, that is incredible because there are so many unknowns in birth in general. And just like making those different plans so that you're not worrying in the back of your mind, like, what if, what if, what if? And I always suggest that, like, make multiple plans because you never know. And like you're in a climate where it snows. So that is like something else to think about. But that is so amazing. I'm just like, congratulations. That is so awesome. I'm so happy for you. And
Well, thank
uh,
you.
yeah. So if somebody were to want to like connect with you or talk with you about like having an HBAC or anything like that, what would be the best way that they could get in touch with you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram at wellnessmatriarch.com, or sorry, I'm on Instagram, wellnessmatriarch, and my website, wellnessmatriarch.com. That's my business that I've been starting. But I'm happy if anybody were to ask me any questions, like very specific questions that they have about home births or hiring a midwife or transferring between different practices, which you absolutely can do. They make it seem like once you choose a provider, they're like, you have to stay with us the whole time. So it was really hard and very good practice for me as far as like not being a people pleaser to call and cancel all my appointments to from the provider that I was seeing. So yeah, you definitely can reach out to me there or on my website.
I love it. And then you have a podcast that you started too. So
I
what is the name
do.
of your podcast so that they can get a listen on there?
It's Wellness Matriarch on all Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Love it. Oh my gosh. I cannot wait for everybody to hear this story. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much for reaching out to me. I actually was following you on my personal account before,
Hmm.
because I was trying to just surround another like great thing is just surround yourself with positive experiences with how you want your birth to go and people too. And if that's like not talking about your pregnancy with your parents or siblings or cousins or whatever, then you should definitely not do that. You should leave.
Absolutely. No, I agree. That's what I did. I stopped talking to people about it when they were like negative about VBAC. So, yes.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the VBAC Junkie podcast. Make sure to leave a rating and subscribe to the show so that you don't miss an episode. And also, I have a free gift for you. If you would like to have a guide on how to prepare for a VBAC, head to my website at www.birthingcometrue.com/VBAC guide. And all of this will be in the show notes, so you can just click that link and head there and download this free guide. I hope you have an amazing week. Until next time, bye.